What's the best reptile for a 10 gallon, 20 gallon, 30, 40 gallon enclosure? Today, we're going to talk about the best feature reptile for every size enclosure. My name's Adam. This is Diamond. You're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles. Stick around. Now, of course, it's subjective what the best species are, but I'm going to do my best to give you a little bit of inspiration, talk about a few species, and just give you my opinion for each. And of course, there's a whole playlist right here about the best for 10 gallon, 20 gallon, 40, etc. Right? And we're going to pick the most common sizes for reptiles from 10 gallons all the way up to 1,450 gallons, which is what that big thing is behind me there. So let's just start it off with number 5. We're going 10 gallons. This is not a top 5, 10 gallons. So I'm gonna talk in inches because most of my audience is American, but I'll put the centimeters on part of the screen as well. I am Canadian, and I know there's a lot of people in the UK and Europe watching. 20 times 10 times 12. And we're rounding, by the way, so some of these are gonna be like 19.5 gallons. It's still a 20, you know what I mean? Anyway, for a 10 gallon, something kind of underrated. I think chameleon geckos are the best. Now, of course, this is for a 10 gallon that's been converted. So I'll give you one of each, okay? I'll give you a 10 gallon that's standing up and a 10 gallon that's kind of on its back or on its side or bottom is the right word I'm looking for, with a screen lid, okay? So if you want something standing up, get a chameleon gecko. Iridactylotes, there's a few different species. They're from New Caledonia. They have the most insane dragon-looking scales, in my opinion. They're absolutely beautiful, underrated. You're probably gonna be the only one of your friends with them. If you want more information, go to Mike Taitula's channel, somewhere like that. Then he knows a lot about them. If you want something that's kind of like a regular 10 gallon enclosure that you can buy for 10 bucks at a flea market, in that case, I would say Stenodactylus. I didn't want to bring them up in this video because we got a couple that we're doing about them. These are the dune geckos or elegant sandfinger geckos or whatever. I talk about them a lot. Diana Reptiliatus talks about them a lot. He's got videos, if you want one, right this second, talking about these amazing small geckos that can be cohabitated, even if they're males. If you do your research, they live on sand, they eat insects. They're just kind of amazing and one of my new favorite obsessions. 20 gallon enclosure. So this is 30 inches times 12 inches times 12 inches high. And I'm talking about 20 gallon longs, by the way, not the 20 gallon high fish tanks. And the reason for this is, well, we're gonna be talking about a terrestrial species, hognose snakes. Now I'm talking about the Western, or what are they called? They're not Westerns anymore. Plains hognose, right? Affectionately known as Western hognose forever and ever. And these guys, I'm talking about males, right? I think that most females would be okay too, but male hognose snakes are gonna top out 1.5 foot, maybe 2 foot if you get a really big one. I have some that are as small as 14 inches, right? So a 14-inch snake, you could probably put that in a 10 gallon. I just like to give snakes more space. And if you get a female, say, you could probably fit it in there, but if it's a 3-foot giant female, go ahead and get yourself a 40 gallon instead. But either way, hognose snakes have an amazing keeled scale, that upturned snout. They're really easy to keep. The humidity and the heat is really easy. This is a North American species, so if you're watching in parts of the US or Canada or where they're from, right? That's where they're from, or even parts of Europe where you have similar climates, it's really simple to keep these guys. You don't need high wattage. They are diurnal, which is fun. So if you're someone who likes to watch your animals during the day when the lights are on, this is the perfect snake for you. They are rear fang venomous, which adds a cool factor. Don't worry, most people have zero reaction at all. It's not medically significant venom. Some people, just like some people are allergic to bee stings, right? Some people could be allergic to their venom, which is just advanced saliva, and then they get an itchy hand or hives or something like that. But either way, hognose snakes, that's the logo for this channel, my first snake, the inspiration for me to start a channel at all. I am in love with hognose snakes. 40 gallon enclosures are 36 inches, so 3 foot by 18 inches by 16 inches. So this is a much larger enclosure, and something that's almost 3 feet, or is 3 feet, can have a much bigger animal. And I'm talking about rosy boas here, okay? I love rosy boas. This is another North American species, and in fact, in North America, there's 2 species of boa. There's rosy boas, and then there are rubber boas. Rubber boas could probably fit in a 20 gallon as well, but they're really not that common, and not a lot of people have them. And there's complications. Where rosy boas are pretty simple. If you can keep a corn snake, you can keep a rosy boa. Now, I'm sure people are gonna come for me. They're not the same thing. Of course they're not the same. I'm just saying similar temperatures, similar humidity. They eat on a similar schedule. They're really similar in terms of care. Now, rosy boas, of course, will act different. They're, in my opinion, stronger. They're just as friendly as, say, something like a corn snake. We're not going to talk about corn snakes today. They're just really easy to take care of, and their temperament usually isn't that bad. Of course, they're really good at eating, so make sure you don't smell like a rodent when you try to pick them up. But in my opinion, they're one of the very coolest species in the entire world that most people don't know about. And although they're raising in popularity, I just don't ever see them becoming as popular as something like a ball python or something like that, even though it's a great option for someone who wants a constrictor that is smaller than a ball python. Because these guys, they're only gonna get probably around 3 feet. I mean, there are gargantuan specimens that have been sighted at 4 feet, but this is really uncommon. Now, the reason I'm making this video is I think we have a bad habit of sticking animals in too small of enclosures. And speaking of bad habits, I think I've found the best way to kick your bad habit, thanks to today's sponsor, Fume. Because not every habit has to be bad, so instead of just breaking your habit completely, just take the bad out of it. And Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device that does just that. I'm not talking about electronics, no smoke, no vapor. I'm talking flavored air. Literally what this device is, first of all, it's kind of like a fidget spinner, like that. So you can decide how much air you want to draw just by spinning the base, and also it feels pretty satisfying to hear the clicking. Anyway, you open that up and you stick in one of the cores, and the cores come in delicious flavors, by the way. The Journey Pack has absolute staples, and then some of the newer flavors like sparkling grapefruit, raspberry lemon, and orange vanilla are unbelievable. As soon as you open up the package of the cores, by the way, the most pleasant scent comes out of them. It's almost like, imagine an air freshener that you can breathe through. You pop the core in, you close it, no batteries, no charging, no nothing. Satisfaction. That's it. And satisfaction you don't have to feel guilty about. And the taste is just as pleasant as the smell. It's not overpowering, it's not too mild. Whoever put the taste together, whoever put these flavors together really knew what they were doing. Fume is easy, it's enjoyable, and it's even fun. And Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories. If that many people have done it, you can too. You can upgrade your Journey Pack to the Solano to enjoy the premium walnut barrel and onyx black coated mouthpiece that has a smoother finish, and you still get 10% off. That's tryfum.com/Wickens to save an additional 10% off on your order today. Thanks Fume for sponsoring today's episode. 75-gallon enclosures are 48, so if we're talking 4 foot now by 18 by 21. So these are good for a lot of different species. I don't recommend bearded dragons because I know that's what you think I'm gonna say. Bearded dragons, they need a bigger enclosure in my opinion. Now, what I would recommend is if you get an average size spotted python. Either way, Antaresia as a genus. You might not have ever heard of this, especially if you're not really a reptile person. This is kind of new to you. But if you're from Australia, you definitely know. This is an Australian python, the smallest python genus in the entire world. And spotted pythons are the biggest in the genus. So basically a genus is, imagine like, it's not technically a family by taxonomy, but imagine a family of animals that are really closely related, and then they branch off into species. Spotted pythons, in my opinion, are just cooler, better looking animals. They're just better for most people. They're less cantankerous most of the time, and they show true semi-arboreal behaviors. And I think you have just enough space in a 75-gallon to give them space to climb. Just give them stuff at the top of the enclosure. They don't need crazy heat or crazy humidity. They eat really well, good temperament. They grow pretty slow. In general, I mean, they're gonna top out 4 feet, most of the time under. And I know that there are outliers. I've seen a 6'2" spotted python. Of course, that's like saying when you get a baby stroller, you're getting a baby stroller for a regular child. If you are a parent, for example, you're not anticipating getting Shaquille O'Neal to come out. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is, obviously there are differences in the rules, or there's exceptions is what I'm trying to say. So if you get the 6-foot spotted python, of course, upgrade to 120, but most spotted pythons would be okay in a 75-gallon their whole life. Okay, we're getting into bigger enclosures now, and these are usually going to be made of PVC rather than glass. Although glass, and all these enclosures, by the way, I recommend PVC. It's lighter, holds humidity better. Just PVC is generally a better material. Of course, you could get wood or whatever, acrylic, stuff like that. But anyway, these I'm talking about mostly PVC. So 4x2x2, so 120 gallons. Now that's what you see on most of the walls. This is a pretty standard size now. Lots of enclosures, companies, Cages, Custom, Dubia, like all these enclosure companies, they make it a version of this. And generally it's a rectangular box with a front opening entryway, which I think is better anyway, because in general, reptiles would rather you come at them forward than on top of them. you feel like a bird, which a lot of animals are predated on by. So anyway, that's a whole different thing. But I'm going to suggest bearded dragon is the number one that I suggest, because everyone knows what a bearded dragon is. They are a great pet. Sure, you got to feed them bugs and you got to feed them vegetation. They need UVB, a high wattage or high percentage of UVB rather. They need high wattage basking bulbs because they do need a really hot basking spot, but they're really personable. If you watch this channel, this is Diamond. He sits on my shoulder all day, really no issues. Now, of course, there are things that I recommend. Blue tongue skinks. I was going to call them BTSs because that's how I wrote it down. Blue tongue skinks, I believe, should be in a 4x2x2. I mean, you could have them probably in a 75 because they don't really need the height. Things like corn snakes, I think, especially big female corn snakes. Males, you could get away with 75 gallon in my opinion. And ball pythons. This is the controversial one. Ball pythons will use the heights. They're going to use the space if you are treating them correctly. Ball pythons aren't the stupid animal that just coil into a ball all day long. I mean, some of them are, but if you're really giving the right humidity, the right temperature, you're giving them things to do, they're probably going to use it. So 120 gallon, in my opinion, is probably the most versatile size. You can keep the most amount of things. And just because I said, put a hognose snake in a 20 doesn't mean you couldn't put it in 120. I've done that just for fun, just to see how one of the females that I have, Wickens, which I show a lot, she used basically every bit of space, including the climbing space. So the choice is yours. Okay, we're getting into some big ones here. 240 gallons. Generally, we don't use gallons at this size. It's 8 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. So I actually have one of these in a box. Thanks Cage's Custom Enclosures for making me this enclosure. I need to rearrange this entire reptile room. I don't like the way it's set up, but I'm gonna be building that hopefully next week. Either way, this is basically 2 4x2x2s put together with nothing in the middle, obviously. And for this, you can start to get into bigger snakes. So in my opinion, I'm not gonna do 6 foot enclosures. I know someone's gonna ask. A 6 foot enclosure, right? 6x2x2, Dumeral's Boas is what I recommend. But let's just jump to 8 foot, and I think you can start putting bigger constrictors. Things like, for example, Burmese pythons. I have a 4x2, it's actually 16 inches high because it's one of the lower quality molded PVCs that I bought from a different company. It was really cheap though, and it works. It's acrylic and it scratches, but who cares? Either way, I've got a 9 foot snake in there. And generally, most people will say the length of the snake should be the same length or shorter than 2 sides of the enclosure. So usually the depth of it and then the length. So this enclosure, that works. So that's 10 foot and I have a 9 foot snake in it. But in my opinion, I like a snake to be able to stretch out within reason. So I think this is good for that size, but once you start getting into 12-foot berms, I think that you're probably better off getting a bigger enclosure that's a little bit wider. Neither here nor there. There's a lot of berms that stay around 10 foot, so that could work. And berms aren't going to use the climbing space as much as another animal we'll talk about in a couple of entries. So I just think that berms, in my opinion, because they're my favorite snake, personal snake in my collection is a Burmese python that actually stays in a bigger enclosure because he is a bit bigger. But either way, they're a more terrestrial snake, although they will use climbing opportunity if presented. I just think that they're amazing, and you guys know I love berms. So 720 gallons or 950 gallons. And now we're really rounding, right? Because I think it's like 713 gallons or whatever. I'm talking about 8 foot by 4 foot deep times 3 foot or 4 foot high enclosures. I think these are where you can start to get into bigger animals. Savannah monitors and tegus is gonna be my recommendation. The reason is they're an animal that needs a little bit of height because they need basking bulbs and UVB bulbs, which generally is gonna be in the enclosure if you're stacking stuff on top of it. They need warmer and more humid temperatures. So you want something that's made of PVC that has some ventilation, but holds in the humidity really, really well. This is a great opportunity to put in, misting systems and foggers and things like that. But Argentine black and white tegus, in my opinion, this is the best size for them, especially when they get to 3 or 4 foot if you get a big example of an animal. I love tegus, and this is what I actually bought this enclosure for, was a tegu. And lastly, 1,450 gallon enclosures. That's what that bad boy is back there. Now, what we're talking about is an 8 foot by 4 foot deep by 6 foot high enclosure. So I can stand in that thing. And I can't jump, but you know what I mean. It's really big, it's really tall. And this is where I think super dwarf, bigger examples of super dwarf reticulated pythons, things that are, 10, 12 foot, or even mainland retics that aren't gargantuan, we're talking 15 foot, 16 foot animals, could probably do okay in there. And just simply because, sure, it's 8 by 4, so it's only 12 feet if we're doing that, you know, 2 lengths, but you're giving them lots of room. And reticulated pythons are animals where they're going to use height. These are naturally arboreal animals, or semi-arboreal at least. I've been to Southeast Asia. I've seen retics in the wild. Every single one of them was up in a tree. Every single one of them. Well, except for this one that almost bit me in the crotch on the ground. But that's because we got it out of a tree to rescue it because it was in someone's house. Either way, these animals are that's what they're going to use for, and that's what that enclosure is for, actually. It's actually a cohab enclosure. I'm going to have retic and some white tree frogs because they're from the same native range, and the snakes are not going to try to eat those frogs. So this is where you can start getting to really interesting, unique examples, but they're more expensive. It's more expensive to set up and things like that. And hopefully that video is going to be ready. So if you want me to do a video about that, I'm almost ready to put in dirt and all of the substrate and logs and stuff and put some animals in. So let me know in the comment section below. That is the best animal for every size. Let me know. Do you think I missed a size? Is there better animals? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, thanks for hitting like and subscribe. It really helps this channel. And as always, a special thanks to the Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking amazing. Thanks for all you do. You get videos early, discounts on merch, one-on-ones. You know about that enclosure way before. That's it. Because there are videos twice a week. That means I'll see you in the next one.